Hello, hello. My name is Ducao, and I'm an educator, engineer, artist, and organizer who created the Great Tit is a Bird, a science fiction storytelling project that follows Black and brown femmes and trans feminine folks, the losses they survive, and the ways they shape our high-tech era, even as they are pushed to the margins. The project consists of an audio drama, 3D animated narrative fiction films, forthcoming animated documentary shorts, and immersive reality films, some of which you can see during this presentation. The project is also based on my past career as a data scientist who worked with geospatial and locally spatialized biometric data, including electroencephalogram, brainwave, and electrocardiogram, heart rate data. The Great Tit is a Bird was launched by Black and brown gender minorities and allies in the United States and Kenya as a way to creatively examine relationships between elite neoimperial academic spaces centered by the global north and women's networks centered by the global majority. The project probes issues its creators have experienced firsthand, including institutional betrayal, techno-colonization, research misconduct, and threats to bodily and embodied sovereignty. Our process includes using, making, and breaking tech tools, including the motion capture system you can see in this behind-the-scenes video. In addition to gender and race, the Great Tit is a Bird explores vulnerability related to other marginalized identities its creators hold. These include disability, carceral status, socioeconomic status, and immigration status. While the Great Tit is a Bird is directly inspired by a range of real-world examples, from the East African women's empowerment group Inua Kike to the male-dominated academic networks connected to convicted sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, its focus on low-income people of color supports its ultimate liberatory goal: survivors of neocolonial aggression affirming solidarity for each other and their community. My team and I are about to finish production on a film called 𝗕𝗶𝗿𝗱, which introduces the main characters of the Great Tit is a Bird story universe. In 𝗕𝗶𝗿𝗱, a 17-year-old named Renea Mendoza tries to escape the complicated grief of her mother's death by taking an international job recruiting marginalized teenagers for a research study, only then to risk their fragile trust by sabotaging the study to prevent them from being exploited. With this year's conference theme being community, structures, and entanglements, I'm interested in entangling the Great Tit is a Bird with the work of liberatory pedagogical theorists such as bell hooks and Paulo Freire. As a STEM educator for 2 decades, I've increasingly found inspiration and sustenance in bell hooks' pedagogical approach, particularly as laid out in the book Teaching to Transgress. Amidst the upheaval of demagogic national leadership, the rise of social justice movements, the global pandemic, and the climate emergency, I've come to realize that a narrow approach to pedagogy, particularly STEM pedagogy, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, is not enough to prepare students, particularly students from historically marginalized groups, with the critical consciousness they need to meet the challenges of today's world. I've also come to realize that for all the ways that collegiate STEM programs have attempted to become more inclusive, many STEM programs, including some that I teach in, continue adhering to what bell hooks via Paulo Freire calls the, quote, banking system of teaching, which is, quote, based on the assumption that memorizing information and regurgitating it represented gaining knowledge that could be deposited, stored, and used at a later date, end quote. This past year specifically, I used bell Hooks's pedagogical theory to revamp a course I designed and teach called Diversity and Technology, which is an advanced writing seminar I teach for engineering undergraduates at New York University's School of Engineering. I originally launched The Great Tit is a Bird during the 2020 pandemic lockdown to process personal trauma, the death of a parent, a reckoning with childhood domestic violence and chronic illness, as well as the professional challenges I've experienced as a student, professional, and teacher, conditioned by the banking system so prevalent in college-level STEM education. Since then, I've slowly started to use The Great Tit is a Bird as a pedagogical tool amongst small groups of students. This feels like a genuinely transgressive act for 3 reasons: the project's sensitive personal themes, the sharing of such themes with STEM students conditioned to marginalize their own identities and experiences while in the classroom, and the cultivation of community within an engineering school. Like bell Hooks, who originally regarded teaching as a job that would support her vocation as a writer, and eventually grew to realize that it was a vital part of her creative practice, I've grown to deeply value teaching as a time and space to cultivate creative community, particularly amongst underrepresented, underestimated, undervalued student technologists yearning to investigate, interrogate, critique, and contribute to technical cultures. Next, I'd like to play for you an early project trailer for The Great Tit is a Bird. And then I'm going to play the trailer again, but with relevant annotations I've selected from bell Hooks's book, Teaching to Transgress. Okay, here we go. Here is the early project trailer.
Hi there.
Hi there.
Hi there.
Hey, Mamai.
Hi there.
Your sickness made me sick.
Hi there.
You screwed me up, but you're the only one I could talk to about my crazy stuff.
Hi there.
So I was thinking, what if I turn on my recorder and pretend?
Renea, that's a great question.
Phone calls, voicemails, commercials, even a radio show. All of it's there on her phone.
I also want to tell you about an opportunity, a research group that could use someone with Renea's talents.
Her story is full of clues when you listen.
The research group, they will study teenagers in situ, the largest informal settlement in 𝗵𝗂𝗶𝗁.
We need to learn more about these iris-stimmed gadgets before we sign up all these kids.
It can image a person's brain and output a representation of what the person is imagining.
That sounds like telepathy to me.
If we all wore helmets connected to this gadget, could you mass electrocute us?
You've reached the voicemail box for 𝗕𝗂𝗃's Girls Shelter. Thank you for staying at 𝗕𝗂𝗃 International Hotel.
As long as there are money men and poor girls, nothing will change.
Don't ever be okay with people treating you like shit.
We didn't have a choice.
They want to make you cry. That's what makes them the power people.
You've done a lot, Renea. Don't ever underestimate what you can do.
If you are a girl in need, do not despair.
Renea, what is wrong with the Ducao shelter?
Electro-whiz.
Lucky for you, Ray, you can overpower all the power people combined.
You really are an electro-whiz.
We're getting you out of here.
The Great Tit is a bird, sparking with electricity that's discharged on their skin.
You are making a real difference for these girls.
Eyes shone more luminous than any moon.
The Great Tit is a bird.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
The Great Tit is a bird. .com.
Okay, so now I'm going to play this trailer again, but this time with annotations. I've selected relevant annotations. I've selected from Bell Hooks's book, Teaching to Transgress. Martin Luther King assured us that the stability of the world will involve a revolution of values to accompany the scientific and freedom revolutions engulfing the earth. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. I came to theory because I was hurting. I came to theory desperate, wanting to grasp what was happening around and within me. I saw in theory then a location for healing. I came to theory young when I was still a child. In The Significance of Theory, Terry Eagleton says, children make the best theorists since they have not been educated into accepting our routine social practice as natural, and so insist on posing to those practices the most embarrassingly general and fundamental questions. Again and again, it was necessary to remind everyone that no education is politically neutral, emphasizing that a white male professor in an English department who teaches only work by, quote, great white men, unquote, is making a political decision. I know that it is not the English language that hurts me, but what the oppressors do with it, how they shape it. It becomes a territory that limits and defines how they use it as a weapon that can shame, humiliate, and colonize. Almost all our teachers in primary school were Black women committed to nurturing intellect so that we could become scholars, thinkers, and cultural workers. Black folks who used our minds. We learned early that our devotion to learning, to a life of the mind, was a counter-hegemonic act, a fundamental way to resist every strategy of white racist colonization. Through our primary school teachers, though our primary school teachers did not define and articulate these practices in theoretical terms, my teachers were enacting a revolutionary pedagogy of resistance that was profoundly anti-colonial. In this time of increased constraints on education and educators and artists and creatives, ranging from book bans to hate speech to laws constraining curricula, Bell Hooks's liberatory pedagogy helps me to remember that teaching is a powerful act. An act so powerful that it can transgress dominant hegemonies, even as many, if not most, educational settings reinforce such dominance. This is particularly true of many post-secondary STEM education programs, where recent pushes to promote entrepreneurship and startup culture only add a seemingly new outer layer to old structures of inequity, injustice, and entrenched power. The Great Tit is a Bird, much of which is set in educational spaces, peeks under the hood of this new slickness and explores its far-reaching effects on Black and brown femmes and transfemmes in STEM. As I develop this project, one issue that I continue to turn over in my mind is how to use The Great Tit is a Bird to introduce feminist issues to STEM students who are, in large part, not feminist identifying or feminine identifying. I recently started requiring my undergraduate engineering students to read diasporic writing, including Beloved by Toni Morrison, Going to Meet the Man by James Baldwin, Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde, Dawn by Octavia Butler, and The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin. So I might be able to slip in the Great Tit is a Bird on a future reading/viewing list, and I welcome your suggestions to this end. Beyond the classroom, Bell Hooks' larger body of work helps me to remember that that teaching can be an essential nutrient for a larger creative practice. From years of teaching, I have learned an enormous amount from my students, many of whom have become friends, artistic collaborators, and technical associates. Even inside of massive oppressive structures, it's these kinds of creative relationships that give me hope. Thank you so much for watching this presentation. You can learn even more about the project by visiting thegreattit.com or contacting bird@ducodestudio.com. You can also see many of the films in this presentation at this tiny URL link. Okay, so to wrap up, I want to shout out the creative team behind the animations and videos in this presentation. They are Latasha Morris, art director and illustrator, Latonia Mertrice, animator, Kate Mitty, performer and sound designer, Darren Cole, sound designer, 𝗵𝗂𝗲 𝗵𝗂𝗁, performer, writer, and sound designer, Susan 𝗔𝗂𝘂𝗰𝗁, story supervisor, Brian Lee, illustrator, Joseph Beer, coder, Junchen Gao, animator, and Jody Frank, coder. Okay, thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.